Hello again. Welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Raymond Peterson.
I'm Bob Anthony.
And I'm Alan Singer.
Educator historian, Dr. Alan Singer, regular on Media Watch. Glad you're with us again. We're doing this pre-taping the Wednesday before our normal Monday air. It's December 4th, being brought to you by the good graces of EVT Educational Productions, Zoom, and we'll probably hear on Manhattan Neighborhood Network on Monday, the 9th of December. A lot to cover, all kinds of crazy stuff going on. So let's jump right in. Big brouhaha and lots of hand wringing on depending on which side of the aisle you're sitting, or lots of defense depending on where you sit in assessing things. But President Joe Biden pardoned his son, Hunter Biden, even though he had said he would not pardon Hunter Biden. And so let's get into a little bit of one, the fact that he said he wouldn't, and then he did, and then the reaction to the pardon from criminal justice people and the general public and Republicans and Democrats.
Well,
wants to jump?
Well, I was going to say that even though President Biden said he wasn't going to pardon his son, when Trump nominated Kash Patel for head of the FBI, Patel, who has a vendetta against Biden's son, I can understand as a parent. You're not gonna let somebody who has vowed to get your son get to him if you can avoid it. So that's why he pardoned him, even though he said he wouldn't.
Okay.
I think that's the gist of it.
Alan, you had some historical or a perspective on the whole Justice Department thing, similar to Ray?
Look, this is the thing. If it was my son, I would have, and I was in a position, I would have done what I could do to keep my son out of jail. My take is that these are victimless crimes. He didn't have to go to jail, but they were going to put him in jail to make a point. I don't think Biden should have gotten involved with all his explanations. I think that just made it worse. But as we know, when Trump was president, he pardoned 144 people, and many of them were very serious criminals. One of the jokes is he pardoned his son-in-law's father, Charles Kushner, who's also a Trump donor. And Kushner was involved in very serious illegal activities. He hired a prostitute to embarrass I think it was his brother-in-law or someone.
His brother.
Or it may have been his brother. Yeah. He pardoned Steve Bannon. He pardoned Paul Manafort. He pardoned Roger Stone. He pardoned Michael Flynn. And these people were involved in really plots against the United States. And Trump has said he will pardon the people the insurrectionists from January 6th. So, that Biden pardoned his son, this is in no way compares with what Trump was planning to do. And again, Patel has said, we're going after people. So
Bob,
you got to protect your kid.
You had a couple of thoughts or examples on precedent on pardons. Did you go all the way back to Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford, or what was the other thought you wanted to raise?
I mean, my thoughts reflect what's been said already. It came to me as a surprise when I heard there was a pardon, but then as the explanation was made about Kash Patel and his he had said he wanted to further investigate that laptop. Remember that? Hunter Biden's laptop.
Yeah.
And dig into Ukraine and whatever he did allegedly did with that. So it does not compare in any way to the shock the nation got when Gerald Ford pardoned Richard Nixon. I mean, it's certainly not at that level. And so it's not surprising to me that Biden pardoned his son. Like you said, Alan, he could have spared himself the long-winded explanation.
Yeah, interestingly enough, what the other historian that I keep tabs on is Heather Cox Richardson, who's got a blog on Substack. And she was actually going through some of this stuff as well. And part of her Substack on December 2nd, I'll quote from it, which says, one legal commentator, Aisha Rangjapa, noted, people criticizing the Hunter Biden pardon need to recognize for the first time, the FBI and Justice Department could literally fabricate evidence or collaborate with a foreign government to find evidence of a crime with zero accountability. That's why the pardon goes back to 2014. And she's talking about the fact that Joe Biden made sure he covered any of the craziness that Trump and his people were trying to dig up with the Ukrainian people trying to do something with the laptop, the whole bit. He said, no, I know where you guys are coming from. I'm going to protect my son. But speaking of those pardons, one of the crazy things that really bothers me when they start talking about pardons, and this will probably get us to where we want to go next on Trump's picks for running the country, was Donald Trump had the unmitigated gall to pardon people who were convicted by Uniform Code of Military Justice court-martial individuals for, these are officers and petty officers who killed a civilian and claimed it was the fog of war, etc. That famous SEAL team guy, Eddie Gallagher, he was brought up on charges of murder. There was a guy with the Army. If I can find their names, I'll call them up. And there was a major who basically didn't even come to trial because Trump said, drop the charges on him. I'll pardon the guy who was actually convicted in the court-martial for killing that civilian. And you people need to reinstate Eddie Gallagher, SEAL team guy Eddie Gallagher, who actually beat the murder rap, but got demoted in rank for other crimes that he had committed and a bunch of other stuff. And the people who testified were members who served under those officers and said this was not fog of war. This was outright murder. And that's why there was at least one conviction and might have been two had he not said drop the charges. So the fact that Pete Hegseth is the guy who twisted Trump's arm while he was working for Fox to get him to put those pardons, commutations, drop charges out, for me, speaks to the total lack of any sense of being ready to be Secretary of Defense by Pete Hegseth. But Pete Hegseth is just one of many totally off-the-wall selections that Donald Trump is trying to foist on the country for his new incoming administration. Let's go down that road, guys. Alan, you've got a good list. What are the three ones we want to start, keep on top of before we don't have that much time to deal with this stuff? Go.
No.
About like 50 people. But one of the things that I noticed, a lot of them come from one of three places. They come from Fox News, which Trump watches all the time, so that's how he knows them. They come from something called the American First Policy Institute, and they come from Project 2025. So now Trump claimed he never heard of Project 2025, but apparently he heard all these characters who were involved in it. So that's the thing that holds these people together. Now, the areas that worry me the most, one, defense, another is health, and the third is the Justice Department, because those are the things that will threaten the life of all of us. Pandemic, an end of civil liberties, and a Justice Department, Defense Department led by people who don't know I was going to say their ass from their elbow. I don't know if
That's all right.
Well, that's Pete Hegseth. So let's jump off there. A whole bunch of people said that ridiculous, whatever, I don't want to call them stuff that I would regret, should not be anywhere near that. And those are people who work with him. You had a couple of interesting links, the women who accused him of sexual assault, the fact that there was a police report out in somewhere in LA or California, it might have been one of the LA counties, I'm not sure which one. And basically, they tried to foist it off as that, oh no, that was consenting between him and the woman. And guess what? She was a serial accuser. She'd accuse other people. Well, the people who broke the story in the New Yorker said, we call the police department and say, what's with this charge about her being a serial accuser? That's crock of bull. She ain't never
But people who worked for him also said that he was publicly drunk and misbehaved.
Yeah,
And that may be behind
absolutely.
the sexual inappropriateness. He also was charged with financial mismanagement of companies. Now, he was a major in the armed forces, which meant he had nothing to do with planning. He had nothing to do with overseeing military operations. Trump picked him because he promises to get woke out of the military, which means he wants to get women out.
Yeah.
Right.
We're
Right.
lucky that we have women in the military.
Enough on him. We know he bad. And
Well,
we've
the other one is he's talking
Well,
about bringing
just
DeSantis to
one
replace
last. I read a subhead in the New Yorker magazine, and I quote here on Hegseth, a whistleblower report and other documents suggest that Trump's nominee to run the Pentagon was forced out of previous leadership positions for his financial mismanagement, sexist behavior, and being repeatedly intoxicated on the job.
typical Trump pick. Next,
Yeah, so that's why he's qualified.
let's go to justice. Let's go to justice.
That is, for me, that is scary.
Okay,
My
so,
kids are worried that I'm going to be on an enemies list.
so
I
we
don't
all will be.
accept
Oh,
it.
we're all on the enemies list already. We're journalists.
Saturday Night Live did a very funny skit where all of them came on and said, no, 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 we don't want to be on the enemies list. We really like you. But
Bob, Matt Gaetz dropped out, right? So who's the replacement pick since Matt Gaetz dropped out? Pam Bondi, the former Florida general.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I thought you were asking Alan. Yeah, Pam Bondi, another super Trump supporter. I mean, she's anybody would have been better than Matt Gaetz, so I can't, really give her points for that.
But she's similar to him.
Yes, she is.
Yeah.
And she's a person who will never, ever say no to Trump. That's the type of person that he appoints. Everyone he's appointed so far will always say yes. And that's dangerous because even as a reporter to an editor, once in a while you say no. And then you explain why. None of these people will say no. And Pam Bondi is one of them.
Alan, what do you got on here?
she was on his first impeachment team. So she has a long history of defending him. But the other thing is she was the legal arm of the right-wing America First Policy Institute. So again, this is one of these behind the scenes right-wing groups that is infiltrating government because of Trump. And that's, we see a lot of the people he's appointing are coming out of these wormholes.
My memory says she became a Trump loyalist and a MAGA supporter when he was being sued by the state of Florida for his phony university and whatever stuff they were doing down there. And he basically said, oh, here's $25,000 for your next election campaign. And guess what? That suit disappeared off the state of Florida's attorney general's list. And so from that day forth, she became a great MAGA supporter, and she has climbed the MAGA ranks to the point where she ended up at that organization you just mentioned, Alan, as their chief legal counsel. So yeah, okay, we see where this is going. What's the next one? We go to
Patel, the FBI.
No.
I never thought I'd be
FCC.
defending the FBI.
Oh yeah, right.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You're correct. FBI. I'm thinking of Brendan Carr. Go ahead.
FBI, Kash Patel, as Ray mentioned earlier.
Yes, go ahead.
What do we have on Kash Patel that says he's a great pick?
Well, he called for defunding the FBI, which is hysterical. He wants to fire all the top experienced people. He wants to shut down its Washington headquarters. And he wants to prosecute, I was going to say persecute, but persecute and prosecute journalists for treason, for leaking information that may jeopardize secret files. But of course, since the government has declared everything top secret, basically you can't report on anything.
Yeah, no, he wants to persecute or prosecute anybody who says anything negative against the administration, Trump in particular. That's his sole purpose.
Yeah.
And that's why Trump appointed him.
Okay. Okay. So now the question before we run out of time is, can he get these people in? The Republicans have a damn monopoly. He got more than the 50 votes that they need. They got like 53. And so it would take 4 Republicans to say no to Donald Trump. Do you think
There are some that are saying no, that are skeptical of
at least 2? But my question is, and that's why I'm throwing this out before we run down the list of the murderers road. Are there more than 2? Can we get to 4? I think Lisa Murkowski may be one. I believe Susan Collins may be another one that might say this is a bridge too far. But I don't know. Is Mitt Romney still in the Senate? I've lost track. Does he have, he's termed out, right? This last session was his last session. So he's no longer there. So those names that you would be trying to count on, you'd have to dig them out of somebody who actually believes in the US Constitution. So, all right.
Eric, there's an additional problem. And that is with the right wing and what Trump's people are claiming is that Article 2, Section 2 of the United States Constitution, which describes the powers of the president. One power of the president is in the event of a national emergency, he can adjourn the House and Senate. Now, if Trump forcefully adjourns the House and Senate, he can then make interim appointments of all these characters, and they could serve for up to 2 years without ever being investigated or approved. So, you remember, Trump decided he would be a dictator on day 1.
Is it 2 years or 1 year, Alan? I thought it was
I thought it was 2, but it may only be 1. But
we have to double check that.
The point is, if Trump is going to be a dictator on day 1 and the Senate has a little backbone and insists on investigating these people and having hearings, he has a way around it. And that's very, very scary.
There's no safeguard against him doing that. Isn't there any kind of provision?
That's an interpretation, though, of something that could be challenged. Not to say that we would win the challenge, but wouldn't it be challengeable in court?
Oh, definitely would be challengeable in the court. There are obscure laws, some dating back to the beginning of the 19th century, that allow a president to declare a state of emergency, deploy troops. Even in the 1970s, there was a national security law that gave the president the power to declare a national emergency.
Was that because
if Trump declares a national emergency, it could be challenged in the courts. But people don't have any confidence that the current Supreme Court, with 3 Trump justices and a 6 right-wing majority, is going to stand up to him.
That's the scary part that I was worried about. Yeah. So, but you're talking about declaring a national emergency, and basically, just to segue in and out, the president in South Korea decided to declare martial law this past week. I mean, this year is the following week before, but his other legislative body, governing body in the state said no. I mean, it wasn't even, they didn't pass. They said, no, that's not acceptable. We do not think that's legal, etc. And he said, no, I have the right to do this. I'm going to declare martial law. And he tried to stick with it. And lo and behold, guys, here's the question. What happened?
And the people went out in the streets. They opposed it. They said, no, you're not going to do this here. This is not happening in South Korea. And that's what we need to do. as Americans, when it comes to that point, that's exactly what we need to do.
So
I mean, I was shocked as anybody else when I heard the news that South Korea had
I couldn't believe it.
yeah, they had tried martial law. And it just shows you how fragile democracy could be.
Yeah.
I mean, just one person has to say one thing, and
Yeah.
it only lasted 6 hours, which is great. The people rose up that fast. But yeah, it just
Yep.
shows you how fragile democracy can be, and don't think that can't come here. Go
Nope.
ahead.
Yeah, Alan was just saying that's going to be his plan. His plan is going to be, I'm a dictator from day one. I'm going to declare martial law or state of emergency, whatever phrase he's going to try to use to try to ram this stuff down our throats. And we need for the legislators and the judges and everybody else that actually have any respect for the Constitution to say, no, that's not a valid cause for declaring martial law. We think that that's insane, and we will challenge that in court. And hopefully there will be enough people in the military to say, no, we're not putting our troops in the streets to enforce your martial law. We don't know. That's the problem that we have. So let's get back to who he's going to put into these places, like that might allow him to do what he's going to do. Justice, Pam Bondi, Defense Department, Pete Hegseth. But you guys said that maybe there's another alternate because Hegseth's running the headwinds. Who's the alternate?
Well, they're talking about DeSantis. His name has been raised because DeSantis also has military experience. He was a lieutenant. So
As
we have global crises, Trump, we got to be Venezuela and Cuba and Iran, and we're going to put a lieutenant in charge of the United States military.
And he wasn't a combat officer.
Yeah, he was a lawyer.
He was a lawyer, right?
but at least he had experience governing a state. That's more than the other guy did. So
Yeah, okay.
Well,
We'll
rather
keep
than
the
declaring
fingers
war on Russia or on Iran,
All right.
he wants to declare war on woke.
okay, right. Let's segue to health because that's big. Who's his health guy? And
There are
who's
three
under the health
people
guy?
in health. There's Kennedy, who's been picked to be the head of the Department of Health and Human Services, but there's also a guy named Weldon and a guy named Macri, who are in charge of the Center for Disease Control and other health things. And my concern is basically they all are COVID vaccine deniers. Oh, and then what's his Dr. Oz, who his name to fame is that he was pushing supplements on his TV show. So
what's Oz's position that he's nominated for?
I'm not sure. There was also someone for Surgeon General who was also involved in pushing supplements. There are people who have medical degrees, but they're, other than Kennedy, of course, who the behavior is very, very questionable.
Most of them are vaccine deniers.
Vaccine deniers, but they also were against COVID mandates.
All right. So
Will we be prepared for the next pandemic? If we are unprepared to take action.
Okay.
The reality is to look at the four of us, we're all in the at-risk group.
Yeah. Well,
Speaking of at-risk group, the entire country is at risk based on these picks that this guy has been talking about. I want to go back to what you guys touched on earlier, which was we all at risk because we're journalists. Most of us are journalists in this room. And so, Alan, you had an interesting link about that whole emergency state, martial law, as a way of giving him the ability to sick his FBI chief on journalists. What was it all about, and how would it come into being?
And just to keep you on track, we have about 3 minutes left. Go ahead, Alan.
The key to the United States Constitution and governance has always been check and balance between the different branches. And right now, we have Trump, we have the Supreme Court appointed by Trump, and we have a Senate and a House controlled by Trump allies. What happens is the checks and balances written into the Constitution are now all jeopardized. Now, the last check is journalism, is a free press. And that's why that was written into the First Amendment of the Constitution, to ensure a free press would remain a check against government. But Project 2025 and which is that guy Carr, they're talking about doing away, defunding public broadcasting, defunding national public radio, taking away their license. And Kash Patel has talked about bringing criminal and civil charges against NBC, CBS, MS, NBC, because of things they don't like. Brandon Carr has promised to, he's the guy picked for federal communications, has promised to carry out the Trump initiative to punish the networks. So what we have are really an attack on journalists who in many ways are the last defense of the Constitution.
All right. I think we're about out of time, right? What? Your mic's off now.
We have about 1 minute and 10 seconds left.
Okay. So with that, it just means we have to stay alert and keep trying to alert the public that they have to get out in the streets. They have to have whatever phone banks and do what they need to do to keep the country riled up and push back against. And hopefully the Senate will not approve all these picks, and keep our fingers crossed. We're about out of time. There's a trial going on in New York about the chokehold in the subway. The verdict may come in any minute, any day. And if it does, we'll have to pick up on it the next show. But this has been Media Watch, folks. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Raymond Peterson.
I'm Alan Singer.
And I'm Bob Anthony. Catch up to us on YouTube at Media Watch EVT.
And we'll catch you the next time, folks. Stay safe.